As we enter into the celebration of Holy Week, I'm standing at the pulpit of the Immaculate Conception Chapel, a place where we regularly gather to hear a message from God. Of course, it's not the only place where God speaks to us, but it is a privileged place, a thin place where the gap between heaven and earth grows narrow. In the liturgy of Palm Sunday, we hear not one but two gospel passages, the only day of the year when we hear two gospels. The first is proclaimed at the very beginning of the service, often in the back of the church or even outside, when the congregation gathers for the blessing of palms to prepare for the procession into the church, which commemorates the triumphal entry of Jesus into Jerusalem on this day. The second gospel proclaimed during the Mass is the dramatic account of the Passion of Christ, proclaimed by several readers, dividing up the narrative with the congregation itself making the responses. And together these two gospels frame the events of this Holy Week. The arrival of Jesus in Jerusalem this day was a big deal for him. In the Gospel of St. Luke, half of the text is about Jesus' trip up to Jerusalem. It extends over several weeks. It's the culmination of his life and his mission. It's the place where he will accomplish the great mission that's been given to him by his Father, the redemption of the human race through death and ultimately through resurrection. And even though this week will be filled with sorrow and suffering for him, today is a day of joy. As he lays eyes upon the holy city of Jerusalem and sees the temple, the holy temple that represents the dwelling place of his Father on earth. He sees the great crowd of the Jewish people come out to receive him and hears their cry, "Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord." And by the way, there's a detail in the gospel account of Palm Sunday in Luke's version. There are no palms. What the people strew in front of Jesus are nothing other than their own cloaks. Think about it. Anybody can cut down a piece of palm, it costs nothing. But to give up your cloak is a sacrifice. That's the point that St. Luke is making in this gospel, that discipleship is costly. It involves giving something of ourselves in order to follow Jesus. As we move into the account of the Passion itself, we're invited to share in the suffering of Christ in order to enter into the experience of his glory. Sometime this week, we're likely to hear the great gospel hymn, "Were you there when they crucified my Lord?" This is a hymn that was composed in the plantation life of an enslaved people who saw the connection between their misery and the victory of Christ on the cross. On a different day, but in a similar way, we too are invited to enter into the experience of Jesus' suffering and death, to share our sorrows and losses, our pain and our stress with him, so that he may lift them up into newness of life. Holy Week is a time of triumph and tragedy, and it's symbolized today by the palm branch. I have here a branch of palms from last season. They escaped the fire of Ash Wednesday, but they're dried out, withered and crumbly. Today, the palms that you receive will be fresh and green and supple, and some people have the ability to weave them into lovely crosses. But we also know from experience that they too will dry out and become withered and crumbling, because the palm is a symbol of both the triumph and the tragedy. They flow together like death and resurrection. And yes, our answer to that hymn must be, yes, we were there when they crucified our Lord. We were there because he did it for us. Recently, I saw a sign outside of a church. When Jesus was on the cross, we were on his mind. We were in the mind and heart of Jesus as he hung upon the cross, lifting our burdens and uniting us with him, so that in our sorrow and loss, we could also enter into his glory and resurrection. And so as we move through the events of Holy Week and commemorate the suffering and death of Jesus, may it be a prelude to the new life to which we're invited, as on Sunday we will renew the vows of our baptism and celebrate resurrection on Easter.